We're making a contact sheet in Lightroom. A contact sheet will generate a page that we can print or save as a file that will basically give us our grid view of all of our images or whatever images we select. We can create our collection, use that collection to create a contact sheet, or we can grab all of our images. My catalog doesn't have a lot of images in it, so I'm just going to grab all of my images and make the contact sheet out of it. And we go into the print module to do that. We click on the print module and it brings up a new dialog. And you can see it has a lot less choices over here on the left, but that's fine. This is exactly what we want to do. We're going to come down to our film strip and Command A to select all of our images. Right now it only shows me one per page. So I'm going to come over to the template browser here. And I'm going to go down and I'm going to start with this 5x8. Actually, let's start with a 4x5 contact sheet. So 4x5 meaning 4 rows or 4 columns, 5 rows, 20 images per page. This, with my images, is going to give me 3 pages of images. I want to reduce this down to 2. So I'm going to create a contact sheet that has 30 images on the page. So starting from this Lightroom template, I'm going to come over to the panels on the right. You can see that the layout style is single image / contact sheet. For the image settings, I'm going to leave all of these unchecked. You can see if I hit zoom to fill, it's going to zoom in on my images and crop them to fill up the space that I give it. I want to see my entire image. So I'm going to leave zoom to fill unchecked. I don't want to rotate my images. I don't want to repeat them one per page, and I don't want any borders. So I'm going to leave those all unchecked. Then we're going to look at the layout. Make sure your ruler inches or ruler units are in inches. And then we're going to change one of our margins. So you can see that the top margin is very small. I want to give it just a little bit more space. So I can slide that slider and you can see it dynamically changes as I do that. I just want to make it a 1/2 inch. And so I can try to land it right on a 1/2 inch, or I can just click on the number and type in 0.5 and hit enter, and it'll make it a 1/2 inch on the top. The next section down is our grid. Right now we have 5 rows, 4 columns. I'm going to go with 6 rows and 5 columns. That's going to give me my 30 images. So there's my 30. It has changed my cell spacing as I changed the number of cells that I have in my grid. And it has made them have a 0 border next to each other. They're butted right up against each other. So you can see like this horizontal image goes from side to side. I want to give my images just a little tiny bit of space. So I'm going to go to 0.05 for my horizontal measure in between. And you can see that that just puts a little tiny gap there. I'm not so worried about my cell size because I have this box checked, which is to keep my cells square. So that makes a nice square grid, meaning my horizontals and my verticals will be the same size because they're going to take up the same amount of space, either horizontally or vertically. The next section is our guides, and that's these dark black lines that we see around here and the gray borders and these lighter gray lines that show us all of our layout. So you can see we can turn the rulers off. We can turn off the page bleed, which is that gray border around it. We can turn off the margin guides, and we can turn off the image cell guides. It's up to you. Whatever you want to be able to see or not see, you can turn them all off at once. It's just up to you as to what you want to see or what you want to not see on your grid. The next one down is our page information. And with our page information, we can add a background color, we can add an identity plate, we can watermark, we can add some other options to the page. The only thing that we want to use in here is the photo info, and we want to make it our file name. And that puts our file name underneath each of our images so that we have some identifier and we can tell what our images are so we can easily identify them. The next thing down is we're going to print this, but we're going to print it to a file, not to a printer. You could print it to a printer, and that would be totally fine. You would just leave this set as printer up here, and you could use pretty much the same settings that we're going to use now. But what we're going to do is change printer to JPEG. So we're going to say print to JPEG file. I'm going to unclick draft print mode or draft mode printing. I'm going to leave my file resolution at 300 pixels per inch. I'm going to turn off print sharpening for sending it out to a file. I don't need it. You could leave it on, but you don't really need it. If you're going to send it to a printer, you would choose the type of paper, matte or glossy, and then you would choose the amount of sharpening that you wanted to have. For our file, we're going to turn it off. We want our JPEG quality at 100. We're not going to custom set the dimensions. The color management we're going to leave as default, which should be sRGB and perceptual. We're not going to do any print adjustments. The next thing we're going to do is hit print to file down here. And when we do that, it brings up our dialog box and lets us choose how we want to save it. So I'm going to use my first initial, last name, underscore, and I'm going to put just A01 for assignment 1. And then I'm going to do another underscore and put contact. Oops. And pick where I want to save it. I'm going to put it in my pictures folder, which is where all my other Lightroom stuff is. I don't need to put anything else after it because it's going to automatically generate numbers for each of the pages. And then I'm going to hit save. And you can see up here in the upper left, it's going to start going through its progress bar, and it is going to save this image. It needs to prepare all 46 of these images and place them onto a page and save it as a JPEG. So that may take a couple of seconds for it to do, or a minute or so. While it's doing that, I'm going to show you how to save this template so that you can easily use it later. So we have all our settings exactly the way we want them, and we want to be able to utilize this for future assignments. So I'm going to come over to my template browser, and I'm going to click this little plus button here, and it's going to bring up my new template dialog. And I'm going to call this 30 image contact. And it's going to save it into my user templates. And when I hit create, I'm going to close these Lightroom templates for a second. You can see down below it that there's user templates with my 30 image contact sheet down there. So that means even if I was in the 20 image contact sheet and I decided I wanted a 30, I could come down to my 30 image contact sheet and I could just click on it. It'll bring it right up. Now, if I wanted to create a 20 image that had this 1/2 inch border, I could come up here and I could change my rows and my columns to the 4. I'm going to change my spacing again so that I have that little bit of space. And then I could click on the template browser and I could call this 20 image contact, and I could create that. And you could see that I've created now 2 templates, and I could switch between 30 and 20 images. So that's creating a contact sheet in Lightroom. That contact sheet is saved wherever you told it to save, and now you can use it for your assignment.